Warning, this video contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewers' discretion is advised.
The official death toll, State Rail says it could be more than 30 dead. Up to 100 are reported injured. If you're a concerned friend or relative, the emergency numbers to call are on screen. The accident happened when the 5:20 Newcastle to Sydney double-decker commuter train slammed into the back of a steam train returning from Maitland. More later.
The Hawkesbury River. There are about 50 casualties, but the number of dead is not known. The Pacific Highway has been blocked to allow emergency services free access. Police have issued special telephone numbers for inquiries: 008 227 228 or 02 332 9344. More details in half an hour. After two trains collided north of Sydney tonight, dozens of emergency service teams, including helicopters, have begun ferrying injured to hospital. With confused reports coming from the scene, dozens of anxious relatives of train travellers have gathered at Hornsby. Police have issued emergency telephone numbers 008 227 228 and 02 332 9344.
Pictures from the crash site show a scene of total devastation. It was a double-decker commuter train packed with passengers returning to Sydney from Newcastle that slammed into the back of a steam train about 7 o'clock tonight. About 20 ambulances went to the scene from Sydney. Paramedics and rescue units from all nearby central coastal towns have also been called, including Gosford. They're attending. The emergency numbers for people who do need information are on the screen here, including the 008 number. The injured are being transferred to Hornsby Hospital, where reserve staff have been called. Gosford Hospital is also accepting patients. Now, it's hard to get to the crash scene. A dirt track is the only access for rescue vehicles. I'll have more information and pictures as they come to hand shortly.
Two trains collided near the Hawkesbury River north of Sydney earlier tonight. It's believed a passenger train from Newcastle ran into the rear of a steam train on special excursion for jazz fans. At least a dozen passengers were trapped when the first two cars of the electric train leapt the rail after the collision. Survivors have been ferried to emergency centres and hospitals.
Well, just people trapped everywhere in the last carriage. I was in the second carriage and they were in the last one. The train just piled into them, just crashed into them, and there's just people just trapped everywhere. It's terrible, absolutely terrible.
Oh. Yes, it goes bang, and I got all this stuff in my eye, and the ambulance fixed it.
Patients on the scene. Many have already been rushed to Hornsby and Gosford hospitals. One survivor described the horror of the smash when a double-decker commuter train slammed into the back of a steam train.
And the force of the impact was so great that the old lady sitting next to me, she was dead, they proclaimed her dead. And also the driver of the train, he was dead too, because, and it was just terrible all over the place. They were all blood and everywhere, and all helicopters everywhere. And I mean, there were people just crying and screaming. I helped the lady who was dead.
I'll have more in a news update before 11 o'clock.
It was an appalling sight that greeted rescuers, twisted metal and an unknown number of victims. Rescuers immediately began searching through the wreckage, but the task was made so much more difficult because several carriages were still trapped in a tunnel, and many passengers had no idea what had happened.
Everyone was screaming and heaps of people just came out, blood dripping down and stuff.
What happened to you when you were on the train?
Oh, I was just a bit shocked, that's all.
Scores of ambulances were rushed from Sydney and Newcastle, but the rescue was hampered by the location in bushland off the Newcastle Expressway. It happened just after 7 o'clock when an intercity express heading towards Sydney slammed into the rear of a stationary excursion train being hauled by a steam engine. It's not clear yet as to why it was stopped on the track. Victims in the last carriage of the excursion train were thrown forward and crushed on top of one another.
Sparks coming up from the top and massive screeching and the smash.
I was asleep just as it happened. I woke up just after it happened.
Were you thrown through the train at all?
No, I was just, I woke up just where I was, somebody vomiting all over me.
Transport Minister Bruce Baird rushed to the scene while rescue efforts continued. Authorities say 6 people are confirmed dead, one of them the driver of the intercity. And at least 50 passengers have been transported to hospitals, many in a serious condition. 300 people were on the steam train which had been returning from a festival in Maitland. Passengers said there'd been trouble earlier. The intercity was held up for half an hour at Brooklyn. Then, given the green light to proceed, it sped through a tunnel, emerging to find the excursion train stopped on the tracks dead ahead. It's believed the driver tried to brake, but was powerless to stop. The rescue operation is expected to go well into the night. Brad Smith, National 9 News.
6 people are dead, countless others are injured. It's an incredible scene on the main Northern Railway line between Newcastle and Sydney, south of the Brooklyn on the Hawkesbury River. The 520 double-decker commuter train from Newcastle slammed into the back of a steam train which was also on its way to Sydney, coming from Maitland in the Hunter Valley. The accident happened about 7 o'clock tonight. Rescue teams have been working in darkness ever since. The only access to the area is via a dirt track. Medical teams have been attending the injured at the scene, while others pull some of the trapped passengers from mangled carriages. The commuter train, being a double-decker, smashed into the lounge carriage of the steam train. Gosford and Hornsby hospitals have called in their reserve staff, and if you're a relative or a friend seeking information, we'll have telephone numbers for you shortly. 20 ambulances have been dispatched from Sydney. Teams of paramedics have come from all over the Central Coast, and in shock, some of those people who survived described the horror.
The train was stopped, and I was running the front train, and there's an old lady sitting next to me, and the steam train just came barging back onto us, and the force of the impact was so great that the old lady sitting next to me, she was dead, they proclaimed her dead, and also the driver of the train, he was dead too, because, and it was just terrible all over the place. They were all blood and everywhere, and all helicopters everywhere. And I mean, there were people just crying and screaming. I helped the lady who was dead when I helped her out. I dragged her out of the train.
More lives lost and so many people hurt. How did it happen and why did it happen? Questions which need answers immediately. Of course, that will take time. The New South Wales State Rail Authority has begun its inquiry and the coroner's investigation is well underway. Reporter Jim Marr is at the scene of the accident and we'll have the latest from him during the program. First, that story in Darren.
Good morning, Anne. Yes, good morning, everyone. 2 separate inquiries are underway into the overnight train smash north of Sydney that has left 6 people dead and more than 100 injured. A southbound commuter train slammed into the back of a steam train packed with nearly 300 day trippers on their way home from a jazz festival. It happened shortly after 7 p.m. on a twisting section of the Northern Line just south of the Hawkesbury River town of Brooklyn. The steam train, being hauled by the famous locomotive number 3801, was stalled on a steep grade at the time, and there are suggestions this morning that someone may have interfered with an emergency brake. Terry Galloway begins our report.
Daylight showed the devastation. The 2 trains shattered by the force of the impact, debris of the crash and the 10-hour rescue operation scattered around the rugged surrounds of the railway embankment. The horror imprinted on the faces of weary rescue workers. 6 people died as a southbound intercity express slammed into the steam train at 9 minutes past 7 last night. Survivors wandered stunned around the crash scene as rescue teams fought their way into the almost inaccessible section of track. As the full impact of the accident struck home, more and more ambulances were rushed in. Paramedics concentrated on the seriously injured. Rescue helicopters flew a shuttle service, taking out the critically hurt. Walking wounded were cared for at a makeshift first aid station. Those who escaped unscathed were marshalled to be bussed out. Already investigations into the cause of the accident have begun. Initial indications are that 3801 was stationary at the time of the impact.
It's very harrowing as usual. It's just staggering, isn't it? Another one on the series, Mr. Wallen? But yet another one, this time with the railways. It's something different, but just as we know into it, we're all very upset by it.
Obviously, when you have an accident of this kind, something has gone wrong, and we mean to find out what went wrong.
The historic steam engine, the Newcastle Flyer, was on its way back to Sydney from a jazz festival at Morpeth near Maitland. The interurban electric train was packed with St George football supporters returning home from the rugby league match of the day at Newcastle. The electric train came out of a tunnel and struck the back of 3801. At Hornsby Hospital, a constant stream of ambulances brought in the injured, some in wheelchairs, others on stretchers, some walking. Barara RSL Club was transformed into a disaster coordination centre. Buses brought in those unhurt.
Terrible, absolutely terrible. And we're just lucky to be alive, all of us. We're the lucky ones.
Bang, and I got all this stuff in my eye, and the ambulance
Was it a big
fixed
noise?
it.
I was genuinely staggered that New South Wales had another accident, another disaster of this kind.
Clean-up operations continue at the crash site. The wreckage of the fatal carriages has been removed. The SRA says the track could be reopened later today. Terry Galloway for 11 a.m.
What went wrong will depend very much on what the passengers have to say, I would say. The indication so far from a lot of those passengers in the train behind the steam train is that they stopped for a while. They were led to believe that the steam train had stopped ahead of them, that there was a problem, then that the way was clear or the steam train had moved off, and the electric train then began to move. After a short time, it slammed into the back of the steam train. So when that inquiry gets underway, that will be the focus of the investigation. At the moment, of course, there is very little to say on that score.
Jim, most of the effort has gone on throughout the night. What did daylight reveal?
Daylight reveals on one side of the track here a pile of matchwood. That was the rear carriage of the steam train. It's just shattered wood. Behind me, there's the clean-up continuing. They're trying to remove the electric train from the track. They're laying down a track of ballast here so that cranes can get in there and just haul it physically off the track and out of the way so that those 20,000 commuters who use the track daily can get back to using the train.
Jim, thank you. We'll get back to you later in the program. Jim Marr joining us from Brooklyn.